Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Well, hello and welcome to the Monday episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable. I'm Matthew Fox. I'm not the Matt you were probably expecting to kick things off, but the other Matt Bruning, while we were talking about the Chiefs. He's still not over what happened in January, so he's going to sit at least part of this one out. But I am joined by Dennis. How are you doing today?
Man, my day started off, looked like it was going to be a day from hell. I had to do a 5:15 pickup. I only agreed to do it because it was 4 minutes from my house. Going to the airport, I get sitting in the driveway. I text this dude at 5:15, and he texts me back, "Yeah, that's tomorrow." So I've been up since I got up about 4 hours earlier than I normally do. Anyways, the rest of the day went fine. It ended up not being a harbinger of doom for my Monday.
That is the most Monday story of all time, though. Getting up extra early for a pickup that doesn't happen.
And it wasn't our. He put the reservation in through the portal in our system, and he put the wrong date in. And then when we sent the confirmation 4 days ago, the 25th, 3 days ago. Apparently, it wasn't reviewed. So, anyways, I guess if you want to pay for 2 trips to the airport.
Special times. Hey, but at least should be a holiday weekend coming up. I don't know if you get a 4-day weekend. I know we're closed next Monday, July 5th, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I took a few days off afterwards, so just got to make it through a couple more days.
Yeah, I'm scheduled to be off on Monday. It'll be a holiday for me, so no 4-day. I'm back working 5 days a week now. So,
the summer of Jubilee has ended.
It has. My wife's like, I let you work 4 days. I've been letting you work. I'm like, no, you didn't let me work 4 days. I mean, granted, you could afford for me to only work 4 days because you bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. So, but I only work 4 days because, well, that was all the work my boss had for me. And frankly, I'm happy that I was able to not be one of the 125 people I had to lay off.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to continue our preview series. We are, as I mentioned, swinging over to the first half of the AFC West. And so that means we're going to start with the Kansas City Chiefs. In 2020, they finished 14-2, first place in the division. They lost 31-9 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. Key additions this offseason, they got Joe Thuney, the guard from the Patriots. They picked up Jerick McKinnon for the game and a half his knee holds out at running back. And they grabbed safety Will Parks, who was with the Denver Broncos at the end of last season. Key losses. They saw Sammy Watkins, receiver, go to the Baltimore Ravens. They saw Damian Williams, who had opted out last year, and they released to go to the Chicago Bears, running back. Eric Fisher, their left tackle, went to the Colts. And Brashad Breeland, cornerback, went to the Vikings. In the draft, they didn't have a first-round pick because they had spent that trading for Orlando Brown from the Ravens. But in the second round, they grabbed Nick Bolton, the linebacker. And they also grabbed Creed Humphrey, who was listed as a center, and I've heard could play center or guard. So the Chiefs have been in the Super Bowl the past 2 seasons. They were in the AFC Championship game in 2018 as well. So 3 years in a row, they've made it to the end of the line in the AFC. Are they the favorites in the AFC again?
Yeah, I mean, until they crash and burn, they kind of got to be. I mean, they've got the best quarterback in the game, one of the best head coaches. Their defense plays well enough to get out. Their defense isn't on the field a ton because the offense is so prolific. The biggest thing is, can Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill not score in 30 seconds so the defense doesn't get out there and get tired out. Who else they got back was Laurent Duvernay-Tardif. So he was their starting guard 2 years ago. And did you say Kyle Long?
Yeah, no, they signed him. He's actually injured again.
Again, yeah. So I love the trade, I guess, for Orlando Brown. The question is I know he fancies himself as a left tackle, but he's terribly unathletic. And not that I guess tackles in general are athletic. He played pretty well filling in for Ronnie Stanley, and I think he's definitely an upgrade over what they had last season. By the time they got to the Super Bowl, anyways. So, I mean, but Patrick Mahomes is the real wild card.
Yeah. Speaking of Matt, he has dropped us some of his thoughts. He said he also believes they're favorites, but that the Bills, Ravens, and Browns are closer than they've been in the past. And I think I would agree with that. I feel like the AFC is loaded and has a lot of great teams right there at the top. But for me, as long as Andy Reid, Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill are kind of there to be the core, I think you'd have to say they start out as the favorites. They're starting to slip into that territory of kind of peak Tom Brady and the Patriots, where you have them as a favorite almost, or right up among the top going into every season. It doesn't mean that they're going to go back to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl again, although I have a sneaking suspicion they'll at least make the AFC Championship game. But for me, that's kind of where they are until we see evidence that they're no longer in that range.
Well, I think part of the challenge they're going to face is what happens with Frank Clark and his gun collection. He already had a checkered past, and then gets pulled over and he's got an Uzi. Now I'll be perfectly honest. I have not read anything about the article other than I know that he's got a less than sterling, I would say, social reputation. But I mean, if it was a licensed gun appropriately stored, then to me it's not an issue.
It's just anytime you see guns and athletes and stuff. Larry Fitzgerald to the Chiefs would make sense. Thanks for the comment, Samuel. We'll talk about the Chiefs' depth at receiver or lack thereof here in a couple of minutes. But Larry Fitzgerald, he may not have a ton left, but there's a lot of contenders that I think he could certainly help. He could be definitely a great mentor in the wide receiver room and a great mentor and calming presence for some of the wild personalities that these teams tend to have, if nothing else.
Is Larry Fitzgerald really going to calm down Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce?
Hill's problem has never been on the field.
Right.
I don't think Kelsey's
he has a lot of fun, and but they're pretty lively on the field. I mean,
they're lively, but I wouldn't. There are things you could say about Tyreek Hill that are not favorable. I don't think many of them have to do with the way he conducts himself on the field.
No, not at all.
Maybe has to do with his babysitting skills.
For sure. I just feel like Larry's out of gas, and while it won't hurt his legacy to go somewhere and be a mentor. I mean, do wide receiver camps, do off-season stuff, make your impact there. I mean, Cornell Powell is probably the guy that's going to step up and take that type of role. And he's much more, at this point in his career, he's much more dynamic than Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me in part to imagine, and we will get back to the Chiefs in a minute. It's hard for me in part to imagine Fitzgerald not being with the Cardinals. I was thinking about, you still always think of Jerry Rice as being a 49er. He had some decent years with the Raiders. I forgot he signed with Seattle until they were showing some clip on Peyton's Places about players and their retirements. I forgot he played for Denver because he was doing some retirement conference with Denver in the background. I was like, oh crap, I forgot. I mean, that's my team. So I have mixed feelings. I could see him though, as first grade as he is, the reason for him to sign with anyone other than Arizona would be a shot at a ring, which seems to be the one thing that he's never been able to really get with Arizona. They had some competitive teams. They were able to get down to the end. I could see him a little bit like, we saw this with LaShawn McCoy. He managed to ride out and pick up 2 rings, one on the bench with the Chiefs, one on the bench with the Buccaneers. Sometimes these veterans end up on a team for that reason. I don't know if that's something that would motivate him. With the Chiefs, I could see him being on the field too. It feels like with the offense they have, any player that gets rumored to go to the Chiefs gets you excited. It doesn't always pan out. We saw last year, I know I was pretty pumped when Le'Veon Bell signed, and that didn't really end up producing anything.
Yeah, that was indeed a disappointment. Let's see, where am I trying to get my thing to sort here? So Kelsey had 145 targets. Hill had 135. Hardman 62. Robinson 59. Both of them are still there. I mean, do we really? Is Larry Fitzgerald going to take targets from them, or is he just going to get Sammy Watkins 55 targets and 35 catches, 37 catches?
That's probably all you're looking for right now from Larry, anyway. But speaking of targets, let's go to fantasy finishes and fantasy projections. So last year, Patrick Mahomes finished as QB4. He had 4,740 yards, 38 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 308 rush yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's been a great starter, usually the top quarterback taken in drafts and redraft and in Dynasty. Where does he finish for you in 2021?
I have him projected at the top. My thing really comes down to can he maintain the rushing yards where'd he go? So last year was a career high in rushing yards. He had 272 2 years ago. So if he can continue to get those, I mean, at some point I feel like he's gonna, if he's not gonna be a Konami code quarterback, is he gonna be the outlier pocket quarterback? And I think, where is that Konami code cutoff? Is it 300 yards? Is it 400 yards? Is it 500 yards rushing? So I like, everybody, just like Mahomes is a fantastic quarterback. He's creative with second and third decisions. He handles pressure great. I think he's going to continue to be great. And Andy Reid is not afraid to let him throw the ball 50, 60 times a game. He's perfectly comfortable with that, in part because he doesn't have any issue with 15 of those attempts going to running backs. So in short areas, in that West Coast offense, they use those short passes like they do handoffs. So if you're getting another 10 passes a game, if those are counting as receiving yards, instead of handing them to the running back. I think you just about. I don't want to say not putting Mahomes is hot takey. Not putting him at 1 is hot takey, but he's certainly the default QB1.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Our friend Matt says he has Mahomes as his QB1 currently. So do I. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody else finishes as QB1, but I think that's where I'm going to start out. He feels like possibly the safest bet.
For sure.
So let's go on to running backs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a solid rookie year, even if it didn't really match some of the lofty draft capital and expectations. What are we going to see in year 2? Matt said he expects him to be more involved in the passing game, but still sees him as more of a high-end RB2 moving forward. He's just worried about touchdowns. Last year, Edwards-Helaire carried the ball 181 times for 803 yards and got 4 touchdowns, had 36 receptions for 297 yards and a touchdown. They don't have incredible depth behind him. Darrell Williams probably figures to be the biggest competition for carries. They have Jerick McKinnon, as I mentioned, a smattering of others. What are you expecting in year 2, Dennis?
I feel like he's going to top the 200 carry mark, maybe 220 with 17 games. I could see him getting 225 carries. He's going to split some time. If McKinnon stays healthy for any stretch of time, Andy Reid's going to give him some veteran playing time. It's for better or worse. And then Darrell Williams, as soon as CEH struggles with pass protection, then I think it ends up being a situation where Andy Reid is like, I know Darrell will pick this block up. And so that could impact it. But Edwards-Helaire was, known for being good at that aspect of the game in college. So I think the disappointment about Clyde Edwards-Helaire was literally 9 out of 10 fantasy analysts going, he went to Kansas City, he's the RB1 in rookie classes last year.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, I still like him. I think he's going to be a big contributor. I just don't think Kansas City is a power running team. They aren't a run first team, and I don't know if he has the exceptional dynamics that we've seen from like a peak LaShawn McCoy or somebody in an Andy Reid offense who's really taken it to that next level. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be solid, involved in rushing and receiving. I think Williams will take some carries. I think they're still going to be a pass-first team. I have him in the RB2 range right now. On my first pass, it looked like I put him around running back 16. There are a lot of guys that I think could be in for big years in teams that might commit to more consistently running the ball. It's nothing against his talent, and obviously Kansas City is a good offense. I don't think he's quite as dynamic as Kareem Hunt. I think he's going to be good, but not great.
Yeah, I also have him at RB16 in my first pass. And I agree. It's a situation where if he got 275 carries, he would be he'd be moving up. Get 275 carries. What did he have for targets? 54 targets. So if you give him 75 targets and 275 carries, now you're talking.
Yeah.
But I think at 5'8", 205, I think they're a little bit hesitant.
Well, and you figure he was RB22 last year. If he creeps up a little bit, being in that 15-16 range wouldn't be surprising. But, if barring injuries too, and that was RB22 with some of the bigger contributors at the position, people like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, some of those guys not being there. That combined with some of the guys we think might step up, it's just hard for me to move him any higher, especially with the passing weapons they have. So speaking of that, when it comes to receivers, hard to look past Tyreek Hill, who finished as wide receiver 1 last year, had 87 receptions, 1,276 yards, and an eye-popping 5th 13 touchdowns. He's an explosive weapon at receiver for the Chiefs. Where do you have him finishing, Dennis?
I have Tyreek at. Sorry, a little too far. I have him at wide receiver 1. I mean, it's an offense that funnels a huge portion of the targets to 2 people, the tight end 1 and the wide receiver 1. Oddly enough, I have Kelce as tight end 1. So they're both in line for 150 targets, 160 targets. I think Hardman was second on the team in targets last
62.
year.
Third on the team. But yeah.
Oh, after Kelce, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's literally Hill and Kelce, and then somebody else each week getting 6 targets and 50 yards or something. And you just don't know who it's going to be in Kansas City. I think to go back to CEH, the thing I think that can really start to move him up, though, is he only had 5 touchdowns last year. So if he can up that touchdown, if he can double that touchdown, that's going to help his fantasy production significantly.
Yeah, and our friend Sam here made a comment to watch out for Jerick McKinnon. If healthy in this offense, he will be deadly. We've seen McKinnon flash before. He seems to be bigger as a pass weapon. In my opinion, if he starts taking a big chunk of passing work out of the backfield, that may drop CEH a little further down. It would be even harder for him to get to that upper end of RB2 if you're stripping away passing work, because I just don't think that Kansas City is enough of a run-oriented offense, and they seem to create a lot of big plays, which is probably what limits CEH's opportunities in the red zone. You see Hill with 15 touchdowns. Those mostly weren't like 1 and 2 yard grabs. Those were some athletic plays. I also have him Hill pretty high. I have him currently sitting at wide receiver 2 in my first pass of rankings. I think he's probably a pretty safe bet to finish in the top 5 as long as he doesn't get hurt. Matt said something similar. He said he likely finishes top 5. Didn't see him finishing as wide receiver 1 because he doesn't think he'll get the volume that some of these other guys that have more potential there will get. So you mentioned Hardman, 62 targets, was kind of the second highest among receivers outside of Hill and Kelce. He's back. Demarcus Robinson is back. You mentioned Cornell Powell. Sammy Watkins is gone. Didn't have a huge target share last year. Is there any receiver outside of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce that you're interested in or willing to start? Matt says he didn't see anyone that he felt comfortable relying on.
Yeah, I think for me it comes down to what league am I in, because I've got some leagues that start 3 or 4 wide receivers and have 2, 3, 4 flexes. I've got some really deep leagues, so I'm rolling out Mecole Hardman or Demarcus Robinson in some of those leagues. In your typical 3 wide receiver, 1 or 2 flex league, you probably have Hardman or Robinson on your bench to cover a bye week and hope that that's the week that the one you started gets a touchdown.
Yeah, so I think for me, it really depends on, we've been waiting to see. Hardman feels like he was the CEH the prior year, where everybody was like, oh man, he went to the Chiefs. Chiefs need a wide receiver there. He's going to be excellent. He probably got overdrafted in rookie draft, and now he's probably swung a little bit the other way to being more of a bargain. I think he could end up being in that wide receiver 3 range, but some of that's going to depend on, like what you said, if they signed like a Larry Fitzgerald or they elevate a Cornell Powell and he gets like 50 targets and the target share remains roughly the same for the other guys, he's not going to move off of where he was. To really think that he's going to move, in my opinion, he needs to get a big chunk of those Sammy Watkins targets from last year and get into the 85 to 90 target range so that he could end up in the, 55 to 70 catch range. I think it's possible. I just don't. it feels like this is the third year of everyone saying Nicole Hardman is going to break out. And even though I think there's potential, I almost am in the I need to see it to believe it. If one of those two, him or Demarcus Robinson, was going to get that big of a target share, I'd lean toward him. But I'm not 100% convinced that either one of them is going to command it. And then, you have wild cards like I know some people are really high on rookie tight end Noah Gray, thinking he's going to sneak in there. You mentioned Cornell Powell, who's the receiver they took. If you end up getting a backfield guy like Jerick McKinnon that ends up taking, all that's going to eat out a target share, and it's not going to be from Hill's targets or Kelsey's targets.
Yeah, well, the Chiefs attempted 630 passes last season, and so it's pretty easy, I think, to project Kelsey and Hill with half of those. Mm-hmm. So then that leaves 300 divided four
by
ways.
Like 10 people.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are pretty insignificant, but I mean, if somebody can be efficient on 60 targets, I mean, they could be a deep league winner. Mm-hmm. Just on efficiency alone. I was never on the Mecole Hardman train. I didn't buy him coming out. I mean, to me, Mecole Hardman is just kind of skinny Cordero Patterson.
Yeah. Well, one guy we know is going to be a solid target is Travis Kelce, who is, I would guess we all have him as the top tight end, probably in Dynasty and for 2021. He finished as tight end one last year, 105 receptions, 1,416 yards, 11 touchdowns. He had more prolific season than a lot of teams' number one wide receiver. Is there any way, barring injury, that you see him not finishing as tight end one in 2021?
No, I just think that given the volume of passing that Kansas City does, and then his position in the pecking order when it comes to targets, I just feel like there's really, and he's earned it. He's went out, he's shown what he can do on a year after year basis. I actually, in my dynasty rankings, I put into football diehards. I have Kelsey as my dynasty tight end 2. I have Kittle at 1. I've been thinking about this with guys like Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. When is it too early to get out? Yeah, are we there with Kelsey? He's going to be 31 or 32 years old. Are we? Yes, he's in a high volume offense. Yes, he probably has a year or two of super high volume production left, maybe even 3. If I don't trade him away this year, I'm hoping he's got 3. If I do, I'm hoping he has 1. But where is that line? When is that time to say, you know what, I'm putting Kelsey on the block. I'm going to get, I've drafted somebody that's going to be, tight end 10 for my next couple years while I see if I can find another ace in the hole tight end like that. But I'm also going to get a couple first-round picks for him to help with my restock. Are we there with Kelsey? Are we looking at that? It's time to move on in dynasty leagues and reap the rewards.
I get that argument and kind of the age, but he's shown no real signs of decline. And unlike, we had a guy like Rob Gronkowski who put up some amazing numbers, but also seemed to get some pretty big injuries that the toll of playing the position took on him. We haven't seen that with Kelsey, so I tend to be toward I think in this offense, Patrick Mahomes and what they're doing, that he could have, 3 or 4 more years of being a top end tight end. So I'm willing to take that gamble, and especially it feels like at that position, I love George Kittle too, and I get the wanting to put him 1, but as Matt and I talked about a little bit on Thursday last week, he's another one. It doesn't seem like he can stay on the field for full seasons. His injury risk seems to hold me back. I love Darren Waller and what he's been able to do, but I don't know if I 100% trust the Raiders. I love Hawkinson and what he's been able to do. I don't know if I totally trust Detroit's offense. And then beyond that, you have a ton of questions, up to and including, Mark Andrews. Is he going to continue to get a 30% target share now that they keep adding receivers? Kelsey feels like his target share is pretty well set. We've seen what he can do. He's been incredibly durable. So given what kind of an advantage it is at that position, I'm still comfortable taking him. In fact, I just did a couple of startups this month, and in both places I went and grabbed him. I was a tight end premium. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm going up. I'm not afraid, of him petering out. Maybe the end will come. I mean, it certainly has snapped to me with other players. I just wrote a fantasy requiem to my biggest fantasy crush, Le'Veon Bell, where I did not see the end coming, was rostering him on 25 teams, and that fell out quickly. It could happen. I feel like Kelsey feels like a pretty safe and reliable bet for me right now.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to move him unless I feel strongly that I'm a 4, 5, 6 seed. If I'm going to finish as one of the last playoff teams with Kelsey, it may be time to start burning it down. But I still think, I'd say he's probably got 2 or 3 more years, which is, a life cycle in Dynasty.
Well, speaking of somebody that may be on a one-year track, let's move to the Las Vegas Raiders. They finished second in the AFC West last year, only 8-8. They were in the playoff race until almost the end and kind of fell out. Key additions, they picked up Kenyon Drake, the running back from Arizona, John Brown, receiver from Buffalo, Yannick Ngakoue, the defensive end, I believe he came from the Ravens, Solomon Thomas, the defensive end who came from the 49ers, Casey Hayward, a cornerback who they plucked from the Los Angeles Chargers, and Nick Martin, the center who came over, I believe, from the Texans. Key losses, Nelson Aguilar, receiver, went to New England. Devontae Booker, who was a decent fill-in running back last year, went to the Giants. Tyrell Williams, who had been a big signing for them a couple years prior, went to be possibly the wide receiver one in Detroit. In the draft, they snagged Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama in the first round. Sports Track's calling him a tackle. I think we had talked about him potentially being a guard. And then Trayvon Morig at safety went in the second. The Raiders have been in the hunt the past 2 seasons. In fact, have been seemingly right in the heart of the playoff chase around the midseason and faded at the end, ending up being one of the first or second teams out, both in 2019 and in 2020. A lot of pressure on Mike Mayock and John Gruden this year, as well as Derek Carr. Can the Raiders make it into the playoffs in 2021?
Is there a lot of pressure on them, though? I mean, they're 4 years into 10-year contracts?
Well, for Gruden, I don't think Gruden gets moved on, but there has been a ton of talk that if they don't make the playoffs, Mike Mayock's gone, that he'll be the scapegoat.
But everybody knows that Mayock isn't drafting anybody Gruden doesn't say, okay, this is our guy.
Yeah.
So, I feel like
he wouldn't be the first deputy to take the fall for the chief.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know. The Raiders are, Gruden is trying to establish, for lack of a better term, the new Raider way. He's trying to draw on some of the old aesthetic, speed on the outside, power on the inside. I know Kenyon Drake was brought in and he's going to be the receiving back. But, he's not a tiny guy, 6'1", 215, 220. Josh Jacobs, do they not throw the ball to Jacobs because they're managing his touches? He's a competent receiver. I think Jacobs is kind of turning into a value in leagues because I don't think that he's in danger of losing his starting job to Kenyon Drake. But I do think that they want to use two backs. He's always used. I mean, he used Latavius Murray and Jalen Richard and who the heck else? They had somebody else there most of that time. But they're going to use multiple backs. I think Jacobs leads the way. He's probably a mid to low end RB2. Let me see if I can remember where I have him. If I remember, I mean look. So I've got Jacobs in redraft going. Well, where do I didn't miss him.
You have some time to look it up before we get the fantasy.
I have him at 21. So, I feel like he's innocent, and Kenyon Drake at 34. So, I think Jacobs is going to be what he's always been and do what he's always done, and he's going to get 250 carries with 17 games, maybe 265. I think he's had like 220 and 265 or something in his 2 seasons. So I don't believe they're sour on him by any stretch of the imagination. I think they're comfortable with him as their starting running back. He's a 2+ down guy. And then they've got Drake, who is probably a 1+ down guy. He's definitely going to be their 3rd down guy, and he's probably going to get 125 carries of his own for Drake. So I like Jacobs. I think he's maybe in a situation where he's being a little bit undersold. Well, he had 273 last year.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm a huge Denver Broncos fan. Those of you that follow the show know that. So the Raiders are not a team that I have any great love for. But I will say I think that some of the moves they made, recognizing that their defense was a problem last year, they went and got a new defensive coordinator. I think they got Dan Quinn. I'll have to look up. They went and got a new defensive coordinator, and they're trying to they've tried to improve in that area. They got some better pass rushing pieces. I don't think they're – it's Gus Bradley. Sorry, Gus Bradley is who they went and got as their defensive coordinator. I think he's going to be a little bit more attacking. If they can have a little bit better of a defense and they can hold on to some of those leads. I think about games like that game against Miami where it looked like Derek Carr had gone down and won it a couple of times and their defense just got gassed and couldn't hold it. I'd like some of the picks that they've made. John Gruden has brought some good energy. It was a funky year last year with them moving to Las Vegas and then having no fans. It'll be kind of exciting to see what kind of, what it's going to be like with fans in the building this year. I don't think their offense was the problem, so I was kind of happy for Derek Carr that he didn't get completely scapegoated because, as we'll see, he actually had a pretty decent season. I thought he kept them in games. I thought their offense has done pretty well. If they can get that defense to pick up, they were one of the youngest teams, if I remember last year, too. It was fascinating watching them on Hard Knocks and, trying to put everything together. So if they have a little bit of maturity, it's just I don't know how many seasons you can be right in the thick of the playoff race and fall apart down the stretch, and that's essentially what's happened to them 2 years in a row. I think if it does happen again this year where they're not able to get in there, and at the same time, the AFC West is an incredibly tough division, and the AFC in general is an incredibly tough place. You're talking about a couple of teams in the South that we think have good chance, a couple of teams in the East that could be frisky, 3 teams at the top of the AFC North. There's only 7 slots, so there's only so much that can go that can get in there. So it's not an easy road, but I think there is some mounting pressure now for them to actually show some results and to have some positive results. So let's move to the fantasy finishes and projections. We'll start at quarterback. What do we expect from Carr? He's kind of an afterthought in a lot of drafts, but he's been a decent finisher. He might be a little underrated. Last year, finished as quarterback 13, threw for 4,103 yards, 27 TDs, and 9 interceptions, rushed for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns. So what do you expect from him, Dennis? Do you think he is getting no respect?
Well, I have him at QB 24, and I feel like he should be higher. As I look at his finish last year, his numbers, I feel like the Raiders wide receivers are going to be better this year. I do think Kenyon Drake is a better second running back than what the Raiders have had. My question comes to, Derek Carr or Daniel Jones for 2021?
Carr.
Derek Carr or Ben Roethlisberger?
Carr.
Derek Carr or Ryan Fitzpatrick?
I have them actually back to back. I have Fitzpatrick slightly ahead. I have Carr at QB 17 and Fitzpatrick at QB 16. I have him kind of middle QB 2. I'll be honest, where the value to me is coming is his ADP is much lower, and he hangs out. He's been one of my favorite guys to grab as a third quarterback in Superflex or as a low-end trade target in Superflex leagues where I'm not high enough to get one of these decent rookies, but I need to do something to patch over my quarterback situation.
Yeah, I feel like I've probably got him 3 or 4 spots too low. I don't know. I like Daniel Jones, but maybe my shares of Daniel Jones are clouding my evaluation process. I struggle with Ben. I don't feel. I know Ben's elbow is healthier this year than it was last year, but healthy or not, does he still have it in the tank? I mean, they went out and got the number 1 running back in the draft.
Yeah.
Big bruising ball carrier, and while they're rebuilding their defense, their offensive line. What's up, Matt? Man,
what's up?
While they're rebuilding their offensive line, that could portend a little bit of less passing opportunities for Ben.
Their line for me is why I do have Roethlisberger lower, in part because of age, but also their line's not in wonderful shape, and they let him go. So to me, I know Las Vegas doesn't have the greatest offensive line. They kind of had some of the same issues, but Carr has been a pretty reliable, to me, underrated performer. We're at the fantasy finishes looking at Carr. Matt, if you want to jump in.
David Carr. Sorry,
Derek Carr.
Yeah, that guy too. His brother. Yeah, he's
David,
the one actually playing football.
I do not have David Carr in my top 32, either as players or probably as analysts. But
all right, so Derek Carr. So he finished. You said QB 13 last year is what you've got.
Yep. He was QB 13.
I don't expect him. I think if I caught that right, you guys both have him right around 17. Is that what you guys said?
Yeah, I had him at 17.
I have him at 24.
I think I'll probably be closer to you, Matt, than Dennis. I still like Carr, and their offense has been good every single year. It's really been their defense that's kind of screwed them. I mean, Derek Carr has been a decent quarterback overall. I mean, he's not been probably what Raider fans want him to be, because I think if he was just a little bit better, he might have led them to at least a playoff berth by now. But I think he's probably a middle-tier quarterback, too.
Yeah.
I'd take Daniel Jones over him. I did hear that part as well. I'd take Daniel Jones over him. That's just because I have so many shares of Daniel Jones at this point. I'm kind of willing to work because I need him. I need him, baby.
I think that's what's driving you two guys. I do not have Jones over him for 2021.
I probably won't at the end when we get to our quarterback rankings, but I want him to be. I need him to be, because in some of my Superflex leagues, I am all in on Daniel Jones as my QB2.
Well, let's transition from quarterback to running back. So we mentioned that they brought in Kenyon Drake last year. He was RB16 for the Cardinals, had 239 carries, 955 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, only 25 receptions, 137 yards, no passing touchdowns. Josh Jacobs was RB8, had 273 carries, 1,065 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns. He actually had more receptions and more receiving yards with 33 receptions and 238 yards. A lot of people have talked about Drake coming in to be kind of the pass catching specialist, which I suppose he could be. If you looked at their numbers from last year, it looked like they had similar roles on the teams they were on. What does this mean for Drake and Jacobs in fantasy? We'll start with you, Dennis.
Well, I think if you're looking at Drake's performance last year, you got to look at what Cliff Kingsbury did. Cliff Kingsbury basically said, Kenyon Drake, you're going to be my Josh Jacobs. Chase Edmonds, you're going to be my Kenyon Drake. So that's kind of the role they played. I think that Drake may be a little better suited for the role in space. I like Jacobs to get his 275 for carries. I think that's a good solid number. And if he stays the same, I don't know. I've got Jacobs down at, I think I said RB23, and Drake is a mid to low RB3. So if they match these, if Jacobs matches this number, I feel like I'm going to be pretty low on it, probably 8 or 10 spots low. But Drake, I think, is going to have to make up his points are going to have to get made up in the passing game. I don't think that he's going to get 240 carries if Jacobs gets 275, even with an extra game.
I'm a little bit higher on Drake. So Josh Jacobs last year had 273 attempts in the 15 games. You got Devontae Booker, who I'm sure got a lot, or the extra attempts due to him playing in the one extra game here than Josh Jacobs. But he got 93 carries. Booker's not there anymore, correct? He's gone?
Yeah, he went to the Giants.
Jalen Richard, 22 carries. Theo Riddick, 6, who I know is gone as well. Alec Ingold.
I think they signed Riddick.
Did they? I thought he went somewhere else. Maybe okay. If he is still there, I'm gonna say I think Kenyon Drake is better than Theo Riddick, even if he is there. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even know who Alec Ingold is, who got 3. I mean, that's over 150 carries altogether. If you add in Derek Carr's 39 rushes, Marcus Mariota had 9 rushes, Henry Ruggs had 9 as well. All that being added together, I think they brought Kenyon Drake in because they want him to be a part of the offense. I don't believe that. I know you hear the same crap for all of these receiving running backs. So they're running all these plays out of the slot. I don't think they brought him in to be their slot receiver. I think he's going to be their receiving back. I think he's a better receiving back than what Josh Jacobs is. Josh Jacobs got 49 targets last year for 33 receptions. Booker got 21, 17. Jalen Richard, 23 targets, 19. So I think most of those will start going to Kenyon Drake, which is where I agree with Dennis. He's going to make most of his points probably in the receiving game. But even if he gets close to 100-something carries, I think Kenyon Drake is more explosive than Josh Jacobs. He's not the better running back, as much as I have been against Josh Jacobs since he's come into the draft. He's a better running back than Kenyon Drake, but I do think Drake's got more explosiveness. I think he's going to get enough work to be an RB2. I think the one thing we've seen from the way they've used Josh Jacobs and the way they've kind of pulled him out at certain points in the game is maybe they don't believe he's going to be their every down back. So I think we're going to see more of Kenyon Drake, not a 50-50 split, probably still a 70-30, which I think is probably close to what it's been with Josh Jacobs and how they mix in so many other running backs. But with Kenyon Drake, he's by far the best other running back they've had in there since Josh Jacobs has been there. So I think he'll be able to produce enough to probably be high-end RB3. I don't know if he'll get enough to get the RB2 numbers, but I think he'll still be a high-end RB3.
Isn't it crazy how David Montgomery was the best running back in that class?
Yeah, it's like some people were saying that, and, it didn't, and, never get any credit. Everybody else, I'm pretty sure, was all over that Josh Jacobs guy.
Or Miles Sanders.
I did have Miles Sanders above Josh Jacobs, too, so I can't speak.
So They did re-sign Theo Riddick
Okay.
for reasons surpassing understanding. Maybe he has some blackmail on John Gruden. I'm not sure. I don't expect Riddick or Richard to be much of a factor, but I actually think Kenyon Drake could have more of a split. They gave him a pretty decent money deal. And I think there have been some people that have commented about Jacobs hasn't always looked incredibly explosive or efficient. I wouldn't be surprised if they have more of a split on carries. If he ends up being a much more of a factor getting carries, I think he will be a big factor receiving wise. That's why I knocked Jacobs down. I currently have him at RB20, and I have Drake at RB27 on my first pass. I do think that they're going to be relatively close because I don't think the split's going to be as far, especially in PPR, as we think. That's just my gut feeling with the way they splashed out, and they signed Drake to a pretty decent deal pretty early on in free agency. So it seemed like there was some kind of a plan. But I guess we'll have to see. Where there appears to be no plan for the Raiders has long been the receiver position. They went and got John Brown this offseason from the Bills. He finished as wide receiver 84 last year, only played in 9 games, caught 33 passes, 458 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Henry Ruggs, who was their top pick in the 2020 draft, was the top receiver taking, I believe, too. Ended up with a whopping 26 receptions for 452 yards and 2 touchdowns in 12 games. Good enough to make him a sterling wide receiver 94. So we'll start with you, Matt. Are there any wide receivers who finish in wide receiver 2 or above range for the Raiders in 2021?
Bryan Edwards. Mullen still, baby. I mean, I say that it's probably
he's an incredible value now because people have almost written him off after not doing a lot.
Well,
last year.
After fantasy Twitter apparently goes wild every time you show a picture of your muscles, I don't know if that's necessarily true. He may have jumped up quite a couple rounds after that picture came out with him and his guns out there. But I really like Edwards. Obviously, the only thing that's ever held him back in college and last year were the injuries. If he can stay healthy, a lot like Paris Campbell of the Colts, we were having a discussion about that in our Discord channel about Paris Campbell, about how, he's had fluky injuries and really kind of the same thing with Edwards. It hasn't been the same injury. It's been different injuries here and there. It's kind of held him back. But I say all that, it's probably going to end up being John Brown, right? Like, it's going to be John Brown who ends up coming over, going off. They got nobody's talking about it. I'd love to see Edwards. I say all that to say I don't think it's going to be Henry Ruggs. I think we've all said it multiple times on this show. We all think he's a good football player. I think he's better for NFL than he is for fantasy. He brings the Raiders something else that none of the other guys on that roster can, but I don't think that's necessarily going to produce in fantasy. But I will stick with Bryan Edwards. I just think his skill set all around is going to be really good for Derek Carr. Having him on the opposite side of the formation than Darren Waller gives Carr 2 big targets to target on the field at all times, and you got John Brown and my Henry Ruggs who can bring speed on the outsides.
Well, John Brown is just about as fast as Henry Ruggs. He's a 4.3 guy, so it's not like he
actually catches the ball, though.
Yeah. Well, but John Brown also weighs 160 pounds. That's always been his bugaboo. I do believe Ruggs is going to improve this year. By improve, it's like you didn't even give a wide receiver 94.
I gave it. It wasn't high.
Yeah. I think Ruggs is going to be one of those guys that until he can find consistency, a la somebody like Tyreek Hill, he's going to be a conundrum. He's going to have, those 94-yard, 2-touchdown, 5-catch games, and then he's going to disappear. So you have to figure out when am I going to place my bet that the consistency is coming? Is it this year when he is cheap? I mean, he was a pretty high draft pick last year. So can you get him for a second-round pick this year? Are you willing to pay that? I know I've made a few overtures to try to get Bryan Edwards this offseason for late second and third-round picks. and people aren't biting. So there's a lot more than just us who think Brian Edwards has the potential to be the wide receiver one there in Las Vegas. Now, do I see Edwards being I could see 65 catches for, 70 catches for 850, 900 yards. I do think Brown and Ruggs are going to be the field stretchers. It just is going to come down to, can Carr get him the ball? Is he going to have enough time? Having that kind of speed. So it is a weapon you can't fake. I like Brian Edwards a lot. I think Ruggs and Brown both finish in the wide receiver 4, 5 area. I think they end up, when all is said and done, basically splitting the deep threat role to an extent, and then Edwards steps in and takes the wide receiver 1 role, which puts him as maybe a wide receiver 3 this year. So
I like Edwards a lot long term. I think eventually he is going to be the guy. I don't know if I think it's going to be this year. I thought Brown was an underrated signing. It reminds me a little bit of when he went to the Bills a couple of years ago, when not a lot was made of him going, and he ended up being a real weapon for Josh Allen in that offense and was actually their number 1 for a while. I think he is going to be the top receiver for the Raiders. That being said, high-end wide or low-end wide receiver 3, more likely a wide receiver 4 is where I think he's going to be. Their top receiver is their tight end. Ruggs, to me, he's wide receiver 6, maybe wide receiver 7. I think he'll come up off of 94, but I don't think he's coming up to 44, probably in the 60s somewhere. I think he's like what you said, you're going to have some boom games, you're going to have some bust games. They have some other receivers that they'll work in. Hopefully Edwards gets a little bit of a crack. We'll probably see Hunter Renfrow not going away. They seem like they are potentially going to use backs more. I think all that's going to eat into volume. And while I think Carr is decent, they sustain one pretty dynamic receiver, which we'll talk about in a second. I don't think that they are a high enough volume pass offense to sustain a bunch of passing weapons. I think part of the appeal of Kenyon Drake too is that they have 2 guys that can kind of pound it on the ground. Whether their offensive line will allow that or not is a question. I guess we'll find out.
Edwards is my second most rostered player.
Yeah,
8 shares across 21 teams.
Yeah, I have him in a bunch of places. I'm not letting go. I'm not giving up. I've just seen some people kind of seem to be writing him off. I saw that workout picture. I guess we'll see. But one of the guys we figure will be pretty heavily involved is tight end Darren Waller. Last year he was tight end 2, 107 receptions, 1,196 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He has become a beast at the position the last few years, been the biggest part of the passing offense for the Raiders. Where does he finish in 2021 for you, Dennis?
I have him at tight end 2, right behind Kelsey.
Right behind Kelsey.
Yep, I think he's set up. He's the Mark Andrews of that offense. He's the leading receiver. He had 60 more targets than the second highest targeted player on the Raiders last year. He had 145 targets. I don't think that number is going to go down. I think when he feels pressure, Derek Carr knows that he knows where Darren Waller is at, and he gets the ball in his direction, and Waller makes something happen with it. It's going to come down to, he had 9 touchdowns to Kelsey's 11. It's going to be close. I think the thing that really separates them, I guess, is just sheer passing volume of the team. The Raiders had over 100 pass attempts fewer than Kansas City, and I just don't think that that can be made up by Darren Waller when it comes to competing against Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I've got him at 3 right now. I still believe in Kittle and what he can do if he stays healthy. I don't want to bet against him and assume he's going to be injured. I hope that he can stay healthy all year. So I've got Kelce at 1, Kittle 2. Pitt's very close at 4. Just because, again, mostly back to the willing it with Daniel Jones. I'm willing it with Kyle Pitts. Don't want to have to sing.
You have some kind of tattoo or something involved?
Not quite a tattoo. I have a bet riding on it where I have to sing that Team Up North fight song and wear a shirt, which I'd really like to not do. So I'm really all in on Kyle Pitts this year. But yeah, Waller 3 would not surprise me if he's 2. Honestly, I think he's the only other tight end that I think could compete with Kelce as the tight end 1 just because of the volume he'll likely get in that offense. That being said, if I do expect Bryan Edwards to step up as much as I was talking about him doing, I think that could end up hurting Waller more than anybody else because I don't expect Bryan Edwards to be that burner down the field.
Yeah. I also have Waller currently at tight end 3 because I have Kittle at 2. Those guys, Kittle, it's always a question if he's going to be on the field. So we'll just have to see what shakes out there. But I think Waller's going to be good and going to continue to be good. But that is a wrap on the top half of the AFC West. So Matt and I will be back on Thursday looking at his favorite second-year player, Justin Herbert, and the Los Angeles Chargers. And the team that consistently takes years off my life, the Denver Broncos, and third-year wonderkin Drew Lock. And we will also hopefully be talking about at least one episode of Loki. So for those of you who are Marvel fanatics, you can jump in there. But before we wrap up, anything either of you guys wants to shout out or plug?
I am good, and Dennis, you are muted. There we go.
Look for Dynasty Nerds. It looks like the mock draft tool is getting ready to release with Scott Fishbowl settings. And I just want to share with people, if you follow me on Twitter, you saw my wife got me my 21-year coin for being sober today. I'm sober, clean and sober 21 years today. And I just want people to know, thank you. If you feel like you're struggling, reach out to me. There's lots of other people in the community that share their situations, and they are more than happy to talk. We'll talk. We'll help point you in the right direction. AA as a program is something that worked for me, and it's worked for countless others. And my life has gotten so much better since I got sober. When I first got sober, my sponsor told me, he said, look, don't wish for things. He goes, because whatever you wish for, you're going to be disappointed because your life is going to turn out so much better. So don't wish for things. And so I just try to keep living, keep moving forward, finding things that I like to do, and then go do them. But if you're struggling, reach out to me, reach out to somebody. Go to a meeting. There's meetings everywhere. There's virtual meetings. You don't have to keep suffering by yourself.
That's a good word. Well, that'll do it for us. You guys